come on. Hey, feel the rhythm. It's getting from the deepest of your soul. Now, use your senses, and everything will be easier than before. Keep on moving, funk is coming. Blind yourself, big. You'll become the star in this dice. Spread your wings, fly to me. Funk is coming.
And here we go with the Holy Spackle. And I'm really glad that you came in. I got to say that, I told you before, but I just want to put it on record. I'm really sorry for the kerfuffle. I was supposed to talk to you yesterday, and I just realized at 3 a.m. that I missed our appointment by 2 hours. And at that time, I said, you know what, fuck it up, I can't do that. It was.
Yeah, you were like, it's so late. I was like, it's okay, it's all right. And I didn't have big plans or anything. I was planning on staying home, so like it wasn't a big deal. Yeah.
It's time zones, right? I mean, they bloody suck.
Yeah, they do.
But okay. So the thing about time zones, it's really interesting because in the old days, and we'll go back to that, in a second with a proper start. What I was going to ask you. The thing with time zones was really interesting in the old conversations because you could basically meet people from all over the world, and you were never really sure if it was in the middle of the night for them or in the middle of the afternoon. And
Yeah, unless you have your phone up with all the time zones or a clock on the wall, you're not gonna know.
But it was really funny because, depending on what time, people were talking, the conversation went from one way to the other. So, I mean, like for us European, it was really funny to speak with people from the US, and they were in the middle of the night while we were just, in the afternoon. So we were, a little bit more, the attitude was different. And you were basically having a conversation with sleepless people. And
Bert Poole pointed out to me that I get really feisty at night. He says I'm more apt to be like a little bit curt and a little bit like real snarky at nighttime. I'm like, really? Like, I never really thought about it, But like, he saw me a couple times late at night and he's like, that was uncalled for. And I was like, what? He's like, that was really snarky. I was like, oh, okay.
yeah.
So maybe, yeah.
So we've been knowing each other for, I would say quite some time, right? I mean, and I think we met during the Google Plus days, if I'm not wrong.
Yeah, maybe like 6-7 years ago.
Yeah.
I showed up around 2014, so.
So was it the same time that you approached that, kind of conversation, or were you involved, before on other medias or stuff like that?
Mm-hmm. So before 2014, I was more of a gamer, and so like a lot of my interactions were on Ventrilo, which if you remember Ventrilo, I don't know.
Yeah.
And so we would just have conversations, and sometimes they'd veer into like political things or philosophical things by accident, just because people banter, or it's just silliness. But I made friends with a gal who co-hosted with David Smalley on a podcast, and she did the science segment. Her name was Rachel. And from Rachel, I sort of fell into a weird rabbit hole. So I used to listen to David Smalley's podcast and be like, I agree with that, I don't agree with that, I agree with that, I don't agree with that, kind of listening. And then I was kind of known as like the Christian troll that was not really like a mean troll, but like I was like, I disagree, and I would argue, like banter in the chats. And then I moved from that to somebody that was involved in the show was in a hangout, and he said, come check these people out. And I was like, what do you mean check these people out? And he said, come on, just see how they're treating me. And I was like, what? Because I'm an atheist. And I was like, okay. And we had late night conversations before. He asked me about, uh, you know, um, the Bible and how could God let David's son suffer. I used to ask hard
Mm-hmm.
questions like that when we used to have conversations in the dead of the night, but they weren't escalated and rude and horrible. And so
Right.
he invites me to this hangout. I have no idea what I'm walking into. It's the first time ever in a Google Hangout, and I have an icon only. And I come in, and some people vouch for me. And in that hangout's Befuddled, if you remember Befuddled, we
Mm-hmm.
became good friends after that. And I didn't know what I was walking into, but I was walking into a Brett Keane hangout.
Wow.
And so Brett was the host, and it's an all-star lineup. Brett's in there, Nephilim Free's in there, Rand Campbell's in there, and those are the ones I remember. And there were a couple other people. I think McKay, who was a reasonable person that we never see anymore, probably because she's like, yeah, I'm a reasonable person. I'm out,
Yeah.
out there, lock.
Got stuff to
But
do, right? Yeah.
right, I have stuff to do. This is getting too much. But this panel, and I was just listening at the time, and I was like, this is so unreal. And so then I started kind of bantering back and forth, and I said, this is a particular theology that you're pushing to Rand Campbell. And I tried to explain why. So I have Rand Campbell, and he's yelling at me, and he's calling me an atheist. And I have Nephilim Free yelling at me, calling me a Catholic, because he's decided whatever I said was Catholic. and
So,
and Brett says, you're showing off for the atheist, and kicks me out.
so
And that was
okay,
my first
that I mean,
interaction.
that is a very interesting story you said. It's a good segue because uh, the thing is that you were always a believer. You were always a Christian, and
Yeah.
the thing which struck me most about you was the fact that, well, I mean, there were several things, but the thing which it really made me wonder about you was the fact that at the time there used to be like two factions, and I mean, I'm not passing judgment because it was as bad for the theists and the atheists, so yeah,
Right.
fuck it. But those two factions were pretty peculiar in the fact that anything, if even the most outrageous thing which was said by anybody belonging to one of those two factions was defended, even if they really never believed
Yeah.
that. You were always kind of an outcast from that, and do you feel the same way? Am I that wrong in that assertion? And how did it shape your conversation in those conversations?
There's a lot to unpack there, but I'd say a couple things. What drove my interest in engaging with atheists? And some people are driven by winning souls. I never came and had the belief that you win souls. I used to believe, and mind you, I'm a deist now, but I used to believe that God wins people's souls, that you are just an interaction. You don't have any part in that. So when I came in to interact with atheists, I want to understand why atheists thought the way they did. So I didn't come in like the other theists going, I'm going to go save you. And so that might be a factor. Another factor is circle the wagons has always bothered me. And I think some of it is if you've ever experienced family trauma, for instance, circling the wagons is something that they do. And then sometimes it'll create unhealth. Circling the wagons is something that happens in unhealthy church culture, where they'll circle the wagons and they'll protect some of the most heinous people ever and people that do crimes and things like that. So I've always had a sensitivity about that, like circling the wagons can be unhealthy. So my view, and it's still my view, is that loyalty is a great trait. It's a great trait unless you're traded it in for integrity. If you are losing integrity to have loyalty, then it's a problem.
So
And so
that
I still feel that way.
that kind of behavior must have been really well, it must have been really hard for you because so I'm trying to tiptoe because I know a little bit about your past experience that I don't want to
Yeah.
bring unless you want to, But
Gotcha.
what I'm imagining is that seeing that kind of behavior, and that was something that in a way you were trying to get out of,
Hmm.
uh, must have been really stressful and and at times painful for you.
Yeah, I think there is a confrontive side to me that wanted to confront that sort of behavior. Um, and I have in the past in personal lives. I think I have in a board meeting at church. But but it's something I guess I've always been willing to confront it because I think it's important for it it to be addressed, I guess. There is an abuse that happens in churches, and it can happen in evangelical churches, it can happen in Catholic churches, it can happen in cults like Jehovah's Witness, and they use a passage called Matthew 18. They use Matthew 18, and they say, anytime you have a confrontation or a problem with a church member, you have to go in private to the member. If they don't listen, and you come in with two people in private and you talk with them. But
Right.
the infractions that they were doing and the heinous things that they were saying were public,
Hmm.
and I had a problem with that. Now, in cult situations like Jehovah's Witnesses, for instance, Matthew 18 is employed where you have to go to your elders and you don't go to the authorities if a crime is committed. Like things like that, I have a problem with. And so, like, yeah, it is stressful in a way, but it also, I mean, dare I say, it's a little cathartic to be able to address it, you know? So,
Right.
because I think I'm not the only theist that feels that way. It's just that the squeaky wheels are the most ridiculous ones, that you're seeing, um, you're seeing some of the worst examples online probably.
Right.
And I think that other theists need to speak out. So, I feel like, and I'm not speaking for Fiona, but I feel like Fiona might feel similarly in that way. So, but
Yeah, and I think your closeness to what at least Fiona was trying to to explain was one of the main reasons why they labeled you as a Catholic, right?
yeah, yeah. Well, I come from some Catholic roots and some Protestant roots both, so I'm kind of familiar with both sides of that. Um, and so, for instance, when somebody says, "Oh, Catholics worship idols," I would be like, "Well, that's not exactly what they're doing," and I would try to explain it from a Catholic's point of view because I didn't have the term charitable, but I understood what it was. Like,
Right.
yeah. So
Yeah,
I
I
learned
mean,
that later on.
I understand the frustration because it has often happened to me, being in a position that we're to try to explain, why that approach was wrong, and I'm not even a
Yeah.
Catholic anymore. So yeah, I understand your frustration. Uh,
Yeah.
um, I mean, I had a very good question. It just blew past me right now.
All right.
Yeah, well, eventually
You can
we'll.
always edit. You can always edit and
Yeah,
come back.
well, no, it's okay. I mean, I think it's going good. So eventually, it will come back to me. It was something to do with the fact. Oh, okay, yeah. So keep in mind that I'm speaking with you. Okay, so I'm interested in your opinion, and it's your
Yeah.
opinion, my opinion. Man, this is a conversation, so fuck it. Yeah, we're not here to. I just said,
Yeah.
well, the fact that said we're not here to win souls. It's really interesting. That is not
Yeah.
uh, my goal. I mean, my
Hmm.
goal is not even to have people watch this. That's why it's called the conversation nobody cares. But I would really love to have an answer for you to this question that I made, to a lot of people which believe, in the Christian God. How do you reconcile the fact that there are so many, and I will use the word flavors, just to be super, neutral in the uh, Abrahamic God belief. How do you? Because it must be something which bothers you, I guess.
Hmm. I think, mind you, my position's changed and I'm a deist, but I think at the time, if I was to rewind, I think I used to say this quite a lot, and I still thought so, that I used to use this terminology. I believe that God calls to all men, is what I used to say. So that because you are created in the image of God, the Imago Dei, um, that and you've heard, apologists say it's written on your hearts, kind of, language like that. That I believe that God calls all men, and this is why there's so many people that are trying to worship a deity of some sort, and they feel this calling. But as far as the flavors of the Christianity goes, I always felt like feelings kind of a loaded word. I thought that we were allowed room for our humanness in our pursuit of God. So whether a Christian believes you should be baptized or sprinkled full immersion or not, whether or not a kid should be baptized or not, these things weren't very important to me. I hate to sound like Matt Slick, but I went for the essentials. Like I thought, okay, in order to be a Christian, what do you have to be? And so things like, oh, I don't know, believing that Jesus is the Son of God and that he died and rose again. Like I hammered out those essentials and all those smaller theological points of how you get saved, or that was just us trying to understand God in my mind. I kind of reconciled it that way, if that makes sense.
So
So I
the
guess for
yeah.
me, the tent was really big. I believe that the tent was bigger and there was room at the table for these different perceptions of God.
So that call for God, I think, is still at the core of you being a deist right now. Is it? Might it be the case that this is a way that you? Uh, Man, I mean, words are really rough because I want to say that you turn into, but it might be disparaging. But it's me and you, so you know what I'm coming from. But is that a way for you to reconcile the things that we talked about? I mean, you turning into a deist is kind of like a good route even to reconcile those differences of believing in what is supposed to be the same God.
I think it's sort of I mean, it kind of might be a partial segue. I never thought about it really until now. That if I already have that view of man's imperfect pursuit of what a God is, and now I have this broader view of God where I think, who could know the mind of God? Like, how could God fit in a box? We don't even understand his creation. We don't understand how the cosmos works completely. We're always learning new things, even about what's on our own planet. Um, the idea that there is a creator that's out there, how in the world could we know the mind of that creator? And so I've kind of moved to, I don't know if God is either good or bad. I don't know. I don't know the mind of God, and I've moved into a very uncomfortable spot in a way. It's more comfortable to have God in a box and have a tighter, you know, these are the lists of His attributes, and and to be in a place where it's like, who could know? It's a little more uncomfortable, but I think that might be part of it. I also think part of it is, I hate to say this, but from the problem of pain perspective, um, I find the attributes that are attributed to God nonsensical now in Christianity. God's jealous, but God's loving. God has an attribute of wrath, but and then whenever you push on them, the goalpost kept changing, and it's like, well, how could you understand the mind of God?
Right.
That's a categorical error that you're making. You can't say God did something wrong, or that God's killing the babies is wrong, because you're making a category error, and they play the game, and I'm like, you're now making it so that God, it means nothing to me. Like there's not a single trait I can push to that says, this is who God is. And so that might have been part of it, is that the traits of God started becoming more and more meaningless the more and more theology you got
Right.
into, the more and more apologetic. So even within Christianity, this model of God, it didn't even matter if the atheists were pushing on the outside. Within Christianity, when you ask questions about what do these traits mean, and you have people that are telling me that jealousy is good if it's God,
Mm-hmm.
and killing is good if it's God, because they just determined it. There's
Right.
just an assumption that's made. Well, now I have a problem, right? I'm kind of stuck in this, you know, this doesn't make a whole lot of sense. And so I think that might have been a big hole for me. And I was constantly struggling to fill that. And I found it aggravating. The aristocrats, as they say, the theological aristocrats of evangelicals is the Calvinists.
Mm-hmm.
And the Calvinists would just bite the bullet and be like, well, God's sovereign. He does what he wants. And he has this attribute of wrath, and he creates human beings for this attribute of wrath. I'm like, okay, I see how you solved a couple problems, but you created a lot more problems. God
Right.
is not loving. God is not good. So like I would end up really stuck in these kind of questions, where why are there so many flavors of Christianity is a lesser problem for me, if that makes sense.
Right. No, no, I understand. I also understand the fact that, well, first of all, the problems that you mentioned are something that people really struggle, and, for some people, they're one of the reasons why they lose their faith. Some of the people is one of the reasons why they shift their faith.
Hmm.
I think that, especially, the problem of pain and the problem of evil in general is a really, powerful question. And I also feel what you said, about the Calvinists. To me, it's always seemed to be the justification were kind of a scapegoat,
Hmm.
basically telling you, yeah, you know what, it is what it is, and if you don't like it, fuck you. Well,
Yep.
okay, fair enough. It is one answer, but you shouldn't be surprised if I tell you it's not really a super satisfying answer.
Right.
So, and yeah, and that's one. So I guess my next question is a segue to that, and because it's something that I always thought, and I wanted, to pick your brain on that. One of the reasons why I thought that the 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 Catholic flavor, I'm keeping using that word because I think it's
Yeah.
funny. It's yeah, I mean, well, I would
Yeah.
love to use, the word moist, but because I love the word moist, but it doesn't really apply. So I'll use the word flavor. Uh, One of the reasons why it is, at least on numbers, the most successful one, among the gods' flavors,
Yeah.
is because they have well, first of all, they got a really well defined theology, they got a proper structure in the church, and most importantly, they have a criteria where if you have, a doubt, a problem, you know who to ask, and that is the doctrine,
Mm.
which is something, the evangelicals, and Protestants in general, they lack. So do you think it is a fair assessment, or am I missing something here?
So unless you are really diving into theology, and I mean, like, maybe you're Matt Slick, or maybe you're that guy Charles, he used to share all the books. I can't think of his name. Or um, maybe Sentinel Apologetics. Like these people are really diving really deep into it. Your average Christian does not know where things come from. They are just told what to do from the pulpit. They want to feel good about Jesus. They believe that he walks with you and talks with you and says he's your friend. And they just kind of swallow down whatever theology is put forth. Now, the primary theology in evangelicals is penal substitution. that we're all suffering from the sin nature. It's in your very nature that you have sin in you, no matter how old you are, even. And that Jesus dies, pays the penalty for your sin. And they kind of just assume that. They don't know where like original sin comes from. Your average person, if you ask them about Saint Augustine, they don't know who it is. Where your average Catholic, actually, a lot of them do. They do know where some of it comes from because they talk to their priest or whatever. Evangelicals, on the other hand, they focus on Bible studies, and they usually, dare I say, there's some Bible study approaches with evangelicals, and this is just your average evangelical church. Could be Methodist or Baptist, whatever. Sometimes they approach it by book, and then they have like a Bible study leader that tries to direct the conversation. Sometimes it's topical, and some of the most troubling problems that the evangelicals get into are topical because they are cherry picking and flipping the Bible. They have no context for anything. They just want an answer. And so one of my favorite singers is Derek Webb, and he has this song called New Law, and it's a real big swing to evangelicals, and it says, "Don't teach me about moderation, just give me a shot of grape juice," which is very evangelical. Like can't have wine, you might get drunk, it's bad. Don't teach me what moderation is and that virtue. Just tell me what to do. Don't teach me about liberty and more complicated issues. Just tell me who to vote for. And I feel like it's frustrating to me that there's a lack of deep thought in evangelicals. It's just, how does it apply to my life? Give me the answers. Give me a quick answer. How does it apply to my life? And I found that a lot of Catholics are a little more. Sure, there's Catholics that do rituals and they have no idea what they're doing, and I'm sure.
Right.
But Catholics are pretty introspective. And so, like, when they're dealing with what they consider as a sin issue, I did something wrong, I told a lie, I really hurt somebody, and they go into confession, they're told to be introspective and think about it. What is it in you that maybe drove you to do that? And they think about it, and I think Jade's talked about that a lot. Like, there's a word I cannot think of. It's not introspection. Oh, it's killing me. There's a word I'm trying to think of, but it is lacking in the evangelical church, and so I see some richness in the Catholic Church that the evangelicals are lacking. So basically, kind of goes like this. Catholic Church kind of goes down from the church down and hands you this thing.
Yes.
And then from there, you have a priest and connection. Evangelicals got printing presses and they go wild.
Yeah.
like from the invention to the printing press on, it's all over the place. But I think American evangelicals don't know where their roots are and why they think the things that they do. A lot of American evangelicals have no idea that there are other atonement theories, like penal substitution doesn't have to be the one. You could have redemption theory, or you could have Christus Victor. Christus Victor makes more sense to me, like God's demonstrating his power over evil to you, as opposed to, you're so horrible, God created a penalty for you of his own doing and his own criteria, and you're so awful that he has to pay the price for you, and then maybe if you believe enough, you can get in. Like, I don't know. It's interesting, but nobody knows the roots of where they come from, and they don't ask the question. So, but Catholics have a rich tradition, something that evangelicals scoff at, and so do Jewish folks. Judaism has a rich tradition. They know where they came from. Yeah.
Okay. I cannot even begin to tell you how really interesting all that was. But we got to wrap it up because, people do not pay attention to that. And the few people watching this, we don't want to bore them. So we're now at the point where I ask you the three questions that you sent me.
Yeah.
And the first question that you sent me is, why is cinema so important to you?
Oh gosh, cinema is so important in different ways. So, um, I was homeschooled and very like restricted as a kid, and I wasn't allowed to watch a lot of modern things, and so I watched a lot of old things. And so, kind of a result, same with music too. I listened to a lot of old music, and so what's kind of happened is I've become very eclectic in my tastes, and I like old and new things quite a lot. And cinema is important to me because, for one, escapism is great. If you're in a tough situation, I love me some escapism, whether it's a movie or a book or or a music even. It's sort of like there are some movies that are sort of like home base to you and they're comforting. Um, there are other movies though that help you explore ideas, and before you even know what philosophy is or um, what it's like to really what goes into composing a shot and what's breakthrough and what's not, and before you even touch these, the go beyond the surface level of a movie, you start exploring the ideas and the feelings and the experiences of other people. Maybe not perfectly, but
Right.
even I guess for me, the visuals of the slight changes and expressions. If an actor can catch that, you know,
No,
those
but
subtle nuances, like it's just so important. And so for me, I think I was so fascinated by how people work and think. It was a really good vehicle for me to really dive into.
no, but I mean, I understand what you're saying. I mean, I think there are some
Hmm.
questions that everybody asks to himself about the world, about his own
Hmm.
person, about society,
Right.
and I always say, I mean, listen, philosophy is not the only language. I mean, because
Hmm.
those questions are universal, but
Hmm.
not everybody is a philosopher. Somebody might be a musician, somebody might be, a writer. So
Hmm.
you can find, well, I would say questions, I would say answers, but at least you find the same question, in
Hmm.
cinema, in books and music, and you can find some answers. So I
Right.
totally get what you say. So the second question is, where where are you most at peace?
So weirdly enough, even though I am a homebody often, I found that where I'm most at peace is often in nature. So particularly, I really love Sequoia National Park.
Mm,
I've been there like maybe 15 times, and it's quite a drive. It's like about 9 hours, but really amazing place. It makes you feel like a wood sprout, and the sound of the trees rushing and everything. It's oddly comforting to feel so small. Like
yeah.
I don't know. It's really weird to me. Like some people don't like to feel so small, but I love it. The other place is the ocean, so I love the ocean. Um, it's like an immediate switch can get turned off. I could be really, I'm
Yeah.
an anxious person. I'm a very anxious person. I can drive 15 minutes to the ocean. I'm lucky. And for whatever reason, everything just turns off. The noise just turns off. And I don't know why, but it's magic. Like it is
I
just magic.
I agree with you. I mean, I just
Hmm.
live 15 minutes from the sea, and the
Hmm.
moment I'm standing on the sand, there's something which clicks. And
Right.
and by the way, I don't know if you ever been there, but I think that a good place for you to be might be Muir Woods, just outside Oakland, San
San Francisco?
Francisco. Yeah,
Yep.
because there is redwoods and the ocean is just there. So that
Yep.
might be the perfect place for you to be. you you
And
get
that
both of these things.
and I'm a movie cinema freak. So the movie Vertigo, is in San Francisco and also the
Yeah.
Muir Woods. And she goes, somewhere about here I lived and somewhere about here I died, and she points
Well,
to the rings on the tree.
and also I don't know if you watched the remake of Planet of the Apes.
Hmm.
You know that the of the the riot apes, they basically moved their community in the Moor Woods. So yeah, okay, yeah, so
Yeah.
good, yeah, it's a place you got to go. There you go.
Yep.
So
For sure.
the last question is, when you were young, who was a hero for you?
So a lot of people bash pastors and priests, and unfortunately, priests have a bad reputation because of things that have been gone awry. But there are a lot of good pastors. There are a lot of good priests, good people. And I had this one youth pastor that at the time I had a very bad father. And at the time, uh, in high school, I think he was one of the most positive influences in my life. Like he was the guy that believed in me where I didn't have anybody like that before. Like sincerely believed in me. And I found it kind of shocking because one, I mean, I have brothers and I had good relationships with my brothers, but I just didn't have a good older father figure. And so he sort of became a father figure to me. And I know that people like to bash clergy, but clergy can come aside you at a time when you need them most, and they can be some of your bigger encouragements. And so um, like as much as I sometimes have a bone to pick with the way churches do things sometimes, I also have really good memories of people that just are supportive and kind and compassionate. And this man had a really good balance of being kind of a guy's guy in some ways. The guys loved him, but a very compassionate, gentle soul, a nurturer at the same time, which I'd never seen before. So, yeah.
So listen, Ollie, it's time to wrap it up. I just want to say a couple of things that while you were speaking, I feel I have to say. So, well, first of all, I still apologize for the fuck up of yesterday. The second thing I want to say is that I really hope, and I'm super sincere right now, that if anybody has to watch one of the videos in this series, it has to be this one.
Really?
Yes, because I think that you are one of the most honest and real persons that I've ever met in this kind of environment. And I mean, you don't owe me money. I don't owe you money. So this is coming from nowhere. So it's sincere, and I really appreciate. I always appreciated the fact that you were there, not because you were able, to find, a side of things which was a little bit different, but mostly because you have always been, in my mind, in my book at least, a very consistent person, and super aware of the limitations that we all face. And you never been a person to be that you were shy of that. You always put yourself, up front, and and I think that's one of those reasons why at times I remember you were viciously attacked, and you had to find. I hope I'm not saying anything which is, but
That's all right.
sometimes you had to find comfort in places where you probably didn't know, you were not so sure, but you find, you were able to build good relationships with people because of that. So I really love the fact that you came here. I just want to tell you that I told you, because when you said, I don't really know what I'm going to talk about that. And
No.
I think this was really, really good and really light. I mean, I had a lot of
Okay.
fun, and that's all it matters.
Good.
Because
good.
And I hope you had fun too.
it-
So
Yeah, honestly, any compliment from you is quite a compliment because I think you have a big bullshit meter. Like a like like you do not pull up and you recognize it right away. And so I take that as a compliment. I try to be real and authentic because I think it could be helpful for some people. But also I also like to have real and authentic relationships with people that I like and respect, and I like and respect you. So, you're somebody that I would love to have a beer with. So,
yeah,
I know that we're not friends until we have a beer or
there you go.
eat dinner. But I do really like and respect you. So, I
Okay.
appreciate that.
Before we start sucking each other's dick, let's say goodbye to everybody. Take care. Ciao, Holy Spackle. Thank you very much.
If I didn't care more than words can say, if I didn't care, would I feel this way?